On October 14, 1943, the skies over Germany were covered in gray clouds. At 25,000 feet, in the thin, freezing air, Sergeant Michael Romano sat huddled in the tail section of a Boeing B-17 flying fortress. He gripped the handles of a pair of Browning M250 caliber machine guns, each nearly as heavy as his own body. The roar of the 4 Wright Cyclone engines thundered through the metal frame, blending with the howling wind outside, making the entire aircraft shudder rhythmically. In front of Romano was a small, frost-blurred dome of plexiglass. Through it, he saw the silhouette of a Focke-Wulf FW-190 circling below, preparing for a low 6 o'clock attack, a direction known as the Flying Fortress's dead zone. Romano crouched lower, his eye pressed against a rudimentary ring and bead sight, a device so primitive it was nearly useless in high-speed combat. It consisted of just 2 pieces of metal, one circular, one straight, which the gunner had to align with the enemy target. There was no targeting aid, no rangefinder, no angle calculator. Everything relied on guesswork. Both he and the German fighter were racing toward each other at a combined speed of over 500 miles per hour. He pulled the trigger. The twin guns roared, tracer rounds carving twin streaks of red through the air, but all of them missed, flying past the FW-190's tail. Romano clenched his jaw. A moment later, the enemy's 20-meter cannon opened fire, shredding the fuselage like thin paper. Metal screamed, and debris flew through the compartment. That same scene repeated 291 times that day, the second bombing raid on Schweinfurt, which history would remember by a grim name: Black Thursday. The U.S. 8th Air Force sent 291 B-17s deep into the heart of Germany's industrial center without fighter escort, since the P-47s of the time couldn't fly that far. By sunset, 60 B-17s never returned, over 20% of the force. Another 138 limped home in ruins, riddled fuselages, burning engines, broken landing gear, and would never fly again. More than 600 American pilots and gunners were killed in a single day. The losses were so devastating that, at this rate, no crew could survive the 25 mission requirement. At the 8th Air Force headquarters in High Wycombe, England, generals convened an emergency meeting. The statistics cut like ice. The Flying Fortress, pride of the U.S. Air Force, had failed in the very role it was trusted most: self-defense. Subsequent analysis reports made the reason clear. Tail gunners, the last line of defense for the bombers, had a hit rate of less than 8%. With limited visibility and a narrow firing angle, they had only seconds to react as enemy fighters approached from behind. In that short time, most rounds went wide. The well-trained German pilots only needed to absorb a few stray bullets before closing in from the tail, the weakest point of the B-17. Commanders stared at maps cluttered with red lines marking flight paths and loss zones. General Henry Hap Arnold, commander of the U.S. Army Air Forces, had to ask the terrifying question: is daylight bombing still viable? Without improved defensive capabilities, the strategy of daylight precision bombing, the belief that Germany's industry could be crippled through accurate daylight airstrikes, would have to end. But while the generals debated statistics and strategy at a small airfield in eastern England, one young soldier was quietly sketching something that could save thousands of lives. That was Bassingbourn Airfield, home of the 91st Bomb Group, where Michael Romano was stationed. That evening, cold winds swept across the foggy runway. While his exhausted crewmates returned to their quarters, Romano sat alone beside the aircraft undergoing repairs. He opened his flight log, pulled out a pencil, and began to draw. On a grease-smudged sheet, he traced the first lines of an idea that broke the rules. an idea later deemed mechanically impossible by engineers, an idea that would eventually triple the tail gunner's accuracy and change the air war over Europe. But at that moment, Romano was just a 22-year-old high school dropout who once worked in a steel mill in Pittsburgh. He wasn't an engineer, had no design training, and saw things only through instinct and practicality. And it was that instinct, along with desperation, that allowed him to see what the massive military machine had missed. To Romano, war wasn't about strategy plans. It was about surviving each second in the cramped tail section, where every whistle of a bullet could mean death. The combat scene ended. Romano quietly logged, "Heavy headwind, enemy at low 6, hits 0. He closed the notebook, but his hands still trembled. Not from fear, but from cold and exhaustion. He knew that unless he found another way, he wouldn't live through all 25 missions. In the quiet night at Bassingbourn, the young gunner began a journey of defying the rules to fight death, a journey that would shake the U.S. military system and inscribe his name in one of the lesser-known chapters of World War II history. In 1937, the U.S. Army Air Corps issued a nearly impossible request. They wanted a high-altitude fighter capable of reaching speeds over 360 miles per hour at 20,000 feet. At that time, even the fastest fighters barely exceeded 300 men per thermometers, and only at low altitudes. Not only that, this aircraft had to climb to 20,000 feet in 6 minutes, be heavily armed, have long range, and remain stable under all flight conditions. For most manufacturers, this was a mission impossible. But for Kelly Johnson, just 27 years old, and already known as one of Lockheed's brightest engineers, it wasn't a barrier. It was a worthy challenge. Instead of seeing limits, he saw a fascinating problem to solve. Kelly came up with a design that broke completely from the norms of the time. Back then, engineers believed fighter planes needed a single engine in the nose to pull the aircraft forward. But Kelly saw the flaws in that setup. A single powerful engine would be extremely heavy, requiring a stronger airframe, which increased weight and drag, a vicious cycle with no way out. His solution was bold. Use 2 smaller engines instead of 1 large one, and don't mount them in the nose. He placed them in 2 long, sleek nacelles on the wings, each with its own propeller. The central fuselage would be narrow and aerodynamically optimized, housing the cockpit and weapons. The tail was split in 2 and connected to each engine pod, a shape no one had seen before. When he presented the first sketch, Lockheed's leadership was skeptical. A twin-engine fighter? Too heavy. Too complex. What if one engine fails? Kelly calmly answered each concern. 2 smaller engines combined would be lighter than a single engine of the same total power. The slender center fuselage would reduce drag. If one engine failed, the other could still get the plane back to base. And the twin tail would actually enhance stability. He spent weeks calculating, proving with equations, and testing in wind tunnels. The results were undeniable. Kelly's model not only met the military's requirements, it exceeded every single one. Eventually, Lockheed decided to take the gamble. They gave him the green light to build a working prototype. Deadline: under 1 year, an enormous pressure. Failure would not only ruin Kelly's career, but could damage the entire company's reputation. Kelly immediately gathered a team of the most talented young engineers. They worked 12 to 14 hours a day, solving problems no one had ever encountered. By summer 1938, the first prototype, the XP-38 Lightning, began to take shape at the Lockheed plant in Burbank. It looked nothing like anything that had flown before. A central fuselage shaped like a winged torpedo, 2 gleaming engine pods like bullets, and a twin tail that gave it an almost alien silhouette. Kelly oversaw every detail, not just from the drawing board, but by physically working alongside mechanics, adjusting parts by hand, believing perfection lived in the smallest elements. One of the biggest challenges was cooling. The two 1,150 horsepower Allison V-1710 engines generated extreme heat, and their placement on the wings limited airflow. Kelly came up with a creative fix: mount radiators behind the engine bays, using passing air to cool both oil and water. The weapon system was also a breakthrough. He concentrated all firepower, 4 50 caliber machine guns and a 20 mm cannon, in the nose of the central fuselage. This setup eliminated synchronization issues with propellers and allowed all bullets to converge on a single point, dramatically increasing firepower. The cockpit was spacious with a wide field of view, and the instrument panel was laid out for reduced pilot fatigue on long missions. To Kelly, pilot comfort wasn't a luxury. It was a key combat factor. By January 1939, the XP-38 prototype was complete. Under the hangar lights, its silver finish looked both elegant and menacing, a machine from the future. On January 27, 1939, test pilot Ben Kelsey prepared for its first flight. Kelly stood on the ground, nervous but fully confident. He had checked every calculation, every detail, hundreds of times. The two engines roared like thunder. The XP-38 rolled, accelerated, and lifted effortlessly off the ground. Kelly held his breath. Any major design flaw would show immediately. But Kelsey quickly radioed back. "This plane flies beautifully. Stable controls, sharp response, rapid acceleration." After 45 minutes, Kelsey landed with a wide grin. "Kelly, you've created something special." Subsequent test flights confirmed it. The P-38 not only met the military's strictest standards, but exceeded expectations in every category. Yet, as Kelly and his team celebrated their success, the world was rapidly sliding toward war. Europe was already in flames, and the aircraft they had just built was about to enter one of the most brutal chapters in human history. While the P-38 prototype was still undergoing testing in 1939, Europe's skies had already begun to burn. In September of that year, Germany invaded Poland, and just days later, Britain and France declared war. The German Luftwaffe quickly demonstrated terrifying power, with formations of Messerschmitt Bf-109s and bombers executing their Blitzkrieg, lightning war, with devastating coordination. American military observers sent back urgent reports. U.S. fighter planes were outdated. The P-40 Warhawk, America's pride at the time, was no match for the Messerschmitts in speed, climb rate, and firepower. Recognizing the danger, the U.S. Air Force fast-tracked the P-38 program, ordering 300 units even before testing was complete. A risky but necessary decision. If there were flaws, hundreds of planes could end up as scrap. But in wartime, time was more valuable than caution. Kelly Johnson and the Lockheed team dove into a real race against time. They worked almost around the clock, building while fixing issues mid-process. One major problem quickly emerged: compressibility. When the P-38 dove at high speeds, airflow over the wings approached transonic levels, causing control surfaces to lock up or become ineffective. Many pilots reported feeling a total loss of control during dives. At the time, engineers still didn't fully understand transonic aerodynamics, but Kelly refused to back down. Throughout 1940, he and his team ran constant tests, adjusting wing angles, adding dive flaps to improve control, and reshaping the wings. The results weren't perfect, but enough to manage the issue, provided pilots were properly trained. Beyond engineering, the challenge extended to mass production. The P-38 was more complex than any American fighter of the era, with more parts and tighter mechanical tolerances. Kelly worked directly with factory managers, streamlining assembly lines without compromising quality and establishing specialized training systems for mechanics and technicians. By December 1941, when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, the United States officially entered the war. At that point, only a few P-38s had been deployed to combat units. Meanwhile, in the Pacific and North Africa, American pilots were still flying underpowered P-40s and paying dearly for it. Casualty reports piled pressure on Lockheed. Kelly knew that every day of delay meant more lives lost. He worked himself to exhaustion, staying at the plant for weeks on end, solving minor flaws, guiding maintenance crews, and training pilots to get the P-38 ready for battle as fast as possible. Finally, by late 1942, the first squadrons of P-38 Lightnings appeared over North Africa. When American pilots saw them, they were stunned and skeptical. This aircraft looked unlike anything they'd ever flown. Long fuselage, twin engines, twin tail. It looked like a strange metal creature. Many feared its bulk meant sluggish performance. But after a few training flights, all doubts vanished. With two 150 horsepower engines, the P-38 surged forward with power, reaching a top speed of 414 mph at 25,000 feet and climbing to 20,000 feet in under 7 minutes. Its nose-mounted firepower, 4 12.7mm machine guns, and a 20mm cannon, created a focused stream of bullets capable of tearing enemy aircraft apart in seconds. Most importantly, its range was unmatched, over 2,100 miles, double that of most fighters of the time. This allowed the P-38 to escort bombers deep into enemy territory, something previously impossible. To bomber crews, the sight of the Lightning's twin silver tails meant survival. The P-38's first combat mission took place in North Africa in November 1942. Facing seasoned Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf FW-190s, American pilots gained the upper hand for the first time. They used speed and firepower to dive from above, strike fast, and retreat before the enemy could respond. The now famous hit-and-run tactic. Early reports stunned commanders. One P-38 downed 3 German planes in a single mission. Another shot down a Ju-88 bomber with just one burst. Loss ratios heavily favored the U.S. For every Lightning lost, 2 to 3 German aircraft were destroyed. Pilots who once doubted the P-38 quickly became devoted. German pilots soon realized just how dangerous the new adversary was. They gave it the nickname Der Gabelschwanz-Teufel, the fork-tailed devil. Luftwaffe tactical manuals warned, never pursue a P-38 climbing, do not engage head-on, only attack with overwhelming advantage. Meanwhile, in the Pacific Theater, the Lightning outperformed the agile but lightly armored Japanese Zero. The key tactic remained: keep speed high, never turn fight. The P-38 was the only aircraft with enough range to fly hundreds of miles over the ocean. However, the P-38's defining mission, the one that would carve its name into World War II history, was still ahead. A daring operation that would seal its legacy forever. In April 1943, American intelligence intercepted and decrypted a secret Japanese transmission that revealed the unthinkable. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the mastermind behind the attack on Pearl Harbor, was scheduled to inspect bases in the South Pacific. The message included his full itinerary, even the exact landing time. To the Americans, Yamamoto wasn't just a high-ranking officer. He was the symbol of Japanese military strategy. Eliminating him would deal a devastating blow to enemy morale. But there was one major obstacle. Yamamoto was to land on Bougainville Island, deep within Japanese territory, over 400 miles from the U.S. base at Guadalcanal. No American fighter could fly that far, except for one, the P-38 Lightning. With drop tanks, the Lightning could barely manage the round trip, but it would push the plane to its absolute limits. Even the slightest navigational error or a prolonged dogfight could leave pilots stranded over open ocean. Still, President Roosevelt personally approved the mission. The operation was codenamed Operation Vengeance. On April 18, 1943, 16 P-38s from the 339th Fighter Squadron took off from Henderson Field on Guadalcanal. Each carried extra fuel tanks under the wings and flew at extremely low altitude, just 50 feet above the sea, to avoid radar detection. They flew in total silence, relying solely on compasses, stopwatches, and the manual calculations of Lieutenant Rex Barber, the lead navigator. After more than 2 hours skimming the vast Pacific, at exactly 9:35 a.m., the squadron spotted 2 Mitsubishi Betty bombers with 6 Zero escorts, Yamamoto's formation. The drop tanks were jettisoned, and the P-38s dove into action. 4 Lightnings climbed to intercept the Zeros, while the rest attacked the bombers. Lieutenant Barber closed in on one, unleashing 20mm cannon and 50 caliber machine gun fire into the Japanese fuselage. The Betty, carrying Yamamoto, began to smoke, veered low toward the jungle, but Barber pursued and fired again. Moments later, the plane exploded and crashed into the Bougainville forest. Admiral Yamamoto was killed instantly. The operation ended with near-perfect execution. Not a single P-38 got lost. After Operation Vengeance, the name P-38 Lightning echoed across the world. But its greatest achievements would come over Europe, where the P-38 became the steel wall guarding Allied bomber squadrons. In this theater, the P-38 was tasked with long-range escort duty for B-17 flying fortresses and B-24 Liberators flying deep into German territory. Before the Lightning, bombers were slaughtered once they penetrated enemy airspace, with losses exceeding 10%, a rate unsustainable for long-term operations. But with the P-38 in play, everything changed. Its unmatched range allowed it to escort bombers from takeoff to return, forcing the Luftwaffe to rethink its tactics. Bomber losses dropped to just 2 to 3%, a life-saving difference for thousands of airmen. P-38 pilots developed new tactics, fully exploiting its speed and firepower. One was the boom and zoom, diving from high altitude, unleashing a deadly burst, and climbing away before the enemy could react. Thanks to its nose-mounted guns, the P-38 could also execute head-on attacks, something most other aircraft couldn't risk. While enemy fire scattered, the Lightning's concentrated stream of bullets delivered lethal strikes. During the winter of 1943-1944, the P-38 faced a new enemy, the weather. At altitudes of tens of thousands of feet, extreme cold froze oil, cracked radiators, and caused engine failures. From California, Kelly Johnson continued receiving frontline reports and updated the design in real time. He oversaw the development of new heating systems, cold-resistant coolants, and revised operating procedures for Europe's brutal conditions. These efforts paid off quickly. The P-38 continued to dominate on both fronts. In the Pacific, it became a nightmare for Japanese pilots. And it was here that America's 2 top fighter aces, Richard Bong, 40 kills, and Thomas Maguire, 38 kills, flew the P-38 throughout their entire careers. To them, the Lightning wasn't just a war machine, it was a trusted partner, faster, stronger, and more reliable than any other fighter when handled properly. Beyond its role as a fighter, the P-38 proved incredibly versatile. It could carry up to 3,000 pounds of bombs, serve as a ground attack aircraft, or be converted into a photo reconnaissance plane that flew deep into enemy territory without weapons. Some versions were even modified into night fighters. Kelly Johnson's original design was so adaptable that it supported every variant, from assault to recon to escort. In June 1944, as Allied forces stormed Normandy on D-Day, P-38s were the first shadows to glide across the French sky. They escorted, destroyed artillery positions, swept the skies of enemy aircraft, and protected each wave of landings. Their twin silver tails became symbols of freedom and victory. Even seasoned German pilots, once captured, admitted, "The P-38 is an enemy we never underestimated. It's fast, powerful, and flown by Americans who know how to use that power to the fullest." As the world praised the P-38, Kelly Johnson remained humble. "I just solved a technical problem. The credit belongs to the men who flew and fought." But everyone knew. Without him, the plane that changed the skies of World War II might never have existed. By the end of World War II in 1945, over 10,000 P-38 Lightnings had been built. They appeared in every theater of war, from the snowy stretches of Alaska to the sun-scorched islands of the South Pacific. The P-38 shot down more enemy aircraft than any other U.S. fighter in the Pacific, and more importantly, it brought thousands of pilots home safely. For many, it was more than a plane. It was a guardian born to protect them in the brutal skies. But for Kelly Johnson, the P-38 wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a new era. Throughout the Lightning's development, he learned a priceless lesson. Bold ideas only need a solid engineering foundation and a small elite team to become reality. He realized the power of speed, flexibility, and creative freedom. Things large organizations often lost to bureaucracy. As early as 1943, while the P-38 was still dominating the battlefield, Lockheed was given a new mission: to develop America's first jet fighter. Kelly Johnson was put in charge. He immediately gathered a team of top engineers, pulled them out of the rigid administrative system, and gave them complete creative control. In just 143 days, a record-breaking feat, the P-80 Shooting Star was born. It made its first successful flight just days before the war in Europe ended. Too late to fight, but enough to launch America into the jet age. Kelly's new way of working, small team, autonomy, speed, and real-world results, became formalized as a model he called Skunk Works. The name, borrowed from a comic strip, sounded lighthearted, but the philosophy behind it was deadly serious. Under his leadership, Skunk Works became the birthplace of America's most advanced and secretive aviation projects. In the decades that followed, they created icons of aerospace history. U-2, the high-altitude reconnaissance plane that flew above 70,000 feet. SR-71 Blackbird, still the fastest manned aircraft in the world. Mach 3.3, F-117. Nighthawk, the first operational stealth aircraft. All bore the mark of Kelly Johnson's philosophy: simplicity, efficiency, boldness, and boundless innovation. He received countless honors: the National Medal of Science, 2 Collier Trophies, the American Institute of Aeronautics Albert Reed Award, and a place in the National Aviation Hall of Fame. But when asked about his accomplishments, he always answered humbly, "I just cleared the way so better people could do their jobs." Those who worked with him understood the truth. Kelly's genius wasn't just technical. It was his ability to create an environment where others could thrive. He shielded his team from politics, made fast decisions, cut through red tape, and constantly emphasized, real-world results matter more than perfect reports. After 42 years of service in 1975, Kelly Johnson retired at age 65. But the legacy he left behind far outlasted the planes that bore his name. More than 40 aircraft designed under his direction, from the P-38 Lightning to the SR-71 Blackbird, shared one thing. They pushed human knowledge beyond the limits of physics. The Skunk Works model he pioneered became a blueprint for every innovation-driven organization, from aerospace firms to modern tech companies. Business and engineering schools around the world teach Kelly Johnson thinking as a benchmark for innovation and technical leadership. And of course, the P-38 Lightning, the aircraft that started it all, became a legend. Years after the war, restoration teams brought old Lightnings back to life, flying them in air shows where the twin engine roar still brought audiences to their feet. In museums, the P-38 is displayed with reverence, a reminder that it once shifted the course of World War II. Pilots who flew the Lightning still gather each year, telling stories of dogfights, of one engine failing and the other bringing them home, of dives that saved lives. To them, the P-38 wasn't just metal, it was a brother in arms. Kelly Johnson rarely attended those reunions. Always humble, soft-spoken, he would just listen and ask about the aircraft's performance. Still the dedicated engineer he'd always been. In a later interview, he smiled while recalling the moment that changed his life. "I once thought being rejected by the Air Force was the worst failure of my life. But now I know it was exactly what I needed to find the right path." Had he been accepted, he might have become one of thousands of good pilots. But because he was turned away, he gave wings to the entire world. As he once said, "Sometimes what seems like your greatest failure is really the turning point to your greatest success." On December 20th, 1990, Kelly Johnson passed away at the age of 80. Lockheed lowered its flags. NASA, the U.S. Air Force, and media worldwide paid tribute. But perhaps the most heartfelt farewell came from an unnamed P-38 pilot, writing in an aviation journal. "Kelly gave us wings when we needed them most. He gave us speed when we were chased, firepower when we were desperate, and the strength to make it home. We who flew in his skies know he never flew with us, but he gave us the sky." And so, the boy who once dreamed of wings in a cold mining town in Michigan truly gave those wings to all of humanity. Wings that changed history forever.